My husband, Alex, casually revealed some startling news on a typical Monday afternoon. I would be alone in the house for the first time in years because he had been invited to go on a week-long business trip abroad. The idea of spending so much time alone made me feel anxious, even though I knew it was a requirement of his profession. After packing his things and telling me he would check in every night, Alex grinned. Before leaving, he waved and gave me a forehead kiss. After he left, the home seemed strangely silent, too deserted, as if it had lost its identity. I took lengthy walks around the neighborhood, worked, and binge-watched my favorite shows in an attempt to fill the void. Things went smoothly for the first 2 days, but on the third night something had changed. I was trying to divert my attention with a book while cuddled up on the couch with a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. A twinge of intrigue and uneasiness passed through me because I wasn't expecting anyone. Alex's best friend Ryan was standing there when I answered the door, with that comfortable, familiar smile on his face. He held a bottle of wine in one hand. "Hello, Emma," he said nonchalantly. "I wanted to check in with you while I was in the area. After Alex told me about his vacation, I thought you might desire some company." With a nervous laugh, I moved aside to make room for him. "It's good to see you, but you didn't have to do that." Since college, Ryan and Alex had been inseparable. Their friendship was based on years of loyalty and shared experiences. Despite the fact that I had known Ryan for nearly as long as I had known Alex, we had never really spent any time together. The three of us, or a bigger group, were always involved. Although he was always there and a part of our life, I had never given him any attention outside of his function as Alex's best buddy. We sat down in the living room and caught up on each other's lives while pouring the wine. We discussed our shared acquaintances, job, and Alex's adjustment to his vacation. I was laughing more than I had in days before I realized how easily the conversation flowed. That night, I realized that I had never really appreciated how charming and genuinely kind Ryan could be. He had a way of making everything feel lighter. A subtle change took place between us as the evening went on. The way Ryan listened to me was effortless, and he gave my words his full attention. It was pleasant, even revitalizing. It had been a while since I had experienced such a connection. He looked at me for a moment longer than normal, and I noticed it. It felt unusual, imbued with something unsaid, but it wasn't improper. I sensed the tension building in the air, even though neither of us recognized it. I dismissed the emotion, telling myself it was either my imagination, the wine, or the loneliness of being apart from Alex. After all, I was Alex's wife and Ryan was Alex's best friend. Nothing needed to be read into it. Ryan grinned and thanked me for the company when I excused myself, stating that it was becoming late. An odd sensation settled in the pit of my stomach as soon as the door closed behind him. I was unable to pinpoint the exact change that had occurred. I felt uneasy when I woke up the following morning. I thought about the night with Ryan more than I should have. It was nothing, I assured myself, just the benefit of having company after a few days of being alone. However, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that something had altered as the hours passed. Our chat had a peculiar undercurrent that I was unable to ignore at the time but now couldn't ignore. I made an effort to divert my attention with work, but Ryan and how I felt around him kept coming up. The uneasiness grew unbearable by late afternoon. The only person who would listen to me without passing judgment was my best friend Sophie, so I took up the phone and called her. I tried to sound informal as I said, "So, Ryan came by last night." "Ryan? A friend of Alex's. For what purpose?" Sophie asked in an instantly inquisitive tone. "I suppose it's just to check in." We spoke while sipping wine. It was pleasant, but I paused, unsure of how to express how I felt. However, what? It pushed. I let out a sigh. There was a moment that felt like something, but I'm not sure how to describe it because it wasn't anything. What specifically did he do to cause Sophie to go silent for a moment? "Nothing," I said hastily. The problem is that it wasn't anything in particular. It felt more like a gut instinct, as if we both knew something we shouldn't have. "Perhaps the wine was speaking," Sophie suggested. "You seem to be overanalyzing things." I wasn't persuaded, but I said maybe. The remainder of the day flew by. I made an effort to ignore the conversation, but Ryan seemed to be on my mind constantly. Really, that was ridiculous. I reminded myself that he was simply being a nice friend. It was unnecessary to exaggerate the situation. When I sat down to supper later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. I hope I didn't stay too long because I had a terrific time last night. I couldn't quite put my finger on why my pulse was pounding as I gazed at the message. Before deciding on a straightforward response, I typed out several other ones. Absolutely not. Having company was pleasant. Another message arrived a few minutes later. I'm happy to hear that. If you don't mind, I was considering coming back tomorrow. Of course, no pressure. I paused, a mixture of remorse and excitement churning within me. There was a part of me that wanted to refuse, to prevent whatever this was becoming. However, another part was tempted, the one that had been isolated and lonely for days. I told myself that nothing would happen. It was merely another cordial visit. Yes, tomorrow works, I said before I had a chance to second-guess myself. The following day was a haze of anxious activity. I was filled with both excitement and trepidation as I considered Ryan's visit. Was I preparing myself for an uncontrollable situation? Or was I just dreaming? We sat down at the kitchen table and shared a meal like we did countless times before when Ryan returned that evening with takeout. This time, however, there was no denying the tension between us. Every chuckle and look had a charged quality, as though we both understood the unsaid bond between us but were too scared to admit it. I was drawn to Ryan in a manner that made me feel both excited and afraid as the evening went on. Our acquaintance with one another was both reassuring and perilous. I couldn't help but ponder what life may be like if we were free from our ties to others. Ryan, do you ever wonder what would happen if we weren't tied to anyone else? I blurted out without thinking. He gave me a startled but unsurprised expression. After a lengthy silence, he responded in a firm yet quiet voice. I've given it more thought than I ought to. My chest was thumping with my heart. That statement caught me off guard, and the situation's truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I stumbled, I'm sorry, as a flood of shame swept over me. That wasn't the right thing to say. Ryan gave a headshake. I don't want to ruin anything, but don't apologize. I felt the same way. Alex and you. That is holy. With the weight of our shared emotions. His words lingered in the air. I nodded as the seriousness of the situation descended upon me. Yes, I said in a whisper. Alex is someone I adore. I understand, Ryan answered quietly, and I appreciate that, but sometimes it's difficult to be around you. We sat in quiet for a long time as we both tried to comprehend the truth of what was happening. There was no turning back now that we had admitted something none of us wanted to recognize. We were perilously close to stepping over the hazy boundary that separated friendship from something more. Ryan jerked to his feet and combed through his hair. Before we do something irrevocable, I should leave. Unable to say, I nodded and watched him leave through the door. I was left to deal with the complex jumble of emotions churning inside of me as the house felt even more empty than before. I woke up the day following Ryan's second visit with a weird mix of relief and fear. On the one hand, I was relieved that we had realized our mistake before it got out of hand. However, I kept thinking about how intense our conversation was and how close we were to doing something that could have ruined everything. Later that morning, Alex gave me a pleasant, familiar call, but I was still plagued by guilt. I tried to react as naturally as I could as he talked about his vacation and how much he missed me, but I felt as though I was in two different universes. In one, I was Alex's devoted wife, and in the other, Ryan had triggered an emotion in me that I wasn't prepared to face. I made the decision to give Ryan a call later that night. I had to make sure that we had not violated any boundaries and that everything was still going as usual between us. When he responded, I said, "Hey," in a hesitant tone. "After last night, I just wanted to check in to see how we're doing." Pause occurred. He answered, "Yeah, we're fine," but his tone was not as light as normal. "Are you certain?" "I don't want our relationship to be strange," I pressed. Ryan let out a sigh. "Look, it's not strange, but I believe we should exercise caution. This is risky, whatever it is. I knew that he was correct. I don't want to destroy anything, I agree. Ryan answered. I don't either, but it's difficult to ignore. I experienced an odd feeling of closure after we hung up. Even if it was the right choice, it didn't seem like a win. We were no longer the same, and something had changed between us. The days that followed were a blur of feelings that I was unable to fully comprehend. I tried to ignore the tension between Ryan and me by immersing myself in my work, but it continued to nag in the back of my mind. I was resolved to move on from everything before Alex returned, who was scheduled to arrive in a few days. However, Ryan texted me the day before Alex returned home. Can we have a conversation? My heart fell. Even though I knew I shouldn't answer, I couldn't help myself. Some issues remained unspoken and unanswered. Yes, with a knot in my stomach from nervousness, I texted back. Ryan returned later that night. The weight of our previous conversation hung between us as we sat on the couch, neither of us making eye contact. Finally, Ryan broke the silence and apologized. I was wrong to text you. Everything has been difficult for me, and I was at a loss for what to do. Gave a headshake. We both let this to go out of control, therefore it's not your fault. Ryan gave a nod. I understand, but the issue is that I can't stop thinking about you. I feel this way even if I don't want to. I forcefully swallowed as I felt my own feelings surface. Ryan, we can't do this. It's unfair to both Alex and us. He added softly. You're right, but that doesn't make it any easier. Because of the irresistible pull between us, neither of us spoke for a moment. I was aware that there would be no turning back once we went over the line. Despite the temptation, I refused to give in. I muttered, I can't harm Alex because I adore him. Ryan got to his feet, his face solemn but resigned. I respect that and am aware of it. Gave a headshake. We both let this to go out of control, therefore it's not your fault. Ryan gave a nod. I understand, but the issue is that I can't stop thinking about you. I feel this way even if I don't want to. I forcefully swallowed as I felt my own feelings surface. Ryan, we can't do this. It's unfair to both Alex and us. He added softly. You're right, but that doesn't make it any easier. Because of the irresistible pull between us, neither of us spoke for a moment. I was aware that there would be no turning back once we went over the line. Despite the temptation, I refused to give in. I muttered, I can't harm Alex because I adore him. Ryan got to his feet, his face solemn but resigned. I respect that and am aware of it. At the door, he stopped and gave me a final glance. I will not be the one to destroy your marriage, but I do care about you. He was gone after that. I gave Alex a big embrace when he got home the following day, trying to tell myself that everything was all right. However, I knew in my heart that something had changed, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't take back what had nearly happened. I never mentioned it to Ryan again. Although we faded into each other's lives, the unsaid bond we had formed left a lasting impression that neither of us would ever be able to forget. With a heavy heart, I watched the door close behind Ryan, realizing that we had almost exceeded the limit. It didn't seem like a total win, but I had made my marriage my choice. The feelings that were evoked inside of me left a mark that would take time to heal. The weight of unsaid emotions can occasionally cause the boundaries we believe to be firm to flex. However, is it always sufficient to stay on the correct side of that line in order to preserve the love and trust that underpin a relationship? If you were me, how would you have responded? Would you stick to your word or take the chance of going over that line? Tell me in the comments section below. I would be interested in knowing what you think about this complicated circumstance. Remember to subscribe if you want to see more stories like this one.